let me introduce again our special guest speaker. Connie Weisman is Vice President of Corporate Partnerships at Plug and Play Tech Center. Plug and Play's global innovation platform connects the best startups to the world's largest corporations to enhance their digital transformation strategy. As one of the original members of Plug and Play, Connie has seen organizations grow to a global platform with over 15,000 startups and 350 corporate partners. Some of Plug and Play's unicorn success stories, and for those that don't know, a unicorn is a startup that has a market valuation of $1 billion or more, include Dropbox, Honey, PayPal. I'm sure you all heard of N26, Hippo, SoundHow, to name a few. Connie is the Director of Enterprise Tech Programs at Plug and Play, which identifies game-changing technologies for corporations in every industry. Technologies cover, but are not limited to, human resources, operations, IT, customer experience, and cybersecurity. Some of the partners she works with on a daily basis are British Telecom, Sherwin-Williams, Willis Towers Watson, Unisys, and ITT. In addition, she is currently involved with Plug and Play's Found Her initiative, which helps identify and support women entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and around the world. So please help me welcome Connie. You could try the wave. And last time I asked if you would, mute your mics until we talk, but turn on your video camera so we feel like a community, please. So Connie, let me start by asking you to please tell us a bit about your professional journey from a nursing student at Pace's Pleasantville campus in New York to VP of Corporate Partnerships at Plug and Play in Silicon Valley, and some key aspects of your role at Plug and Play. And I might notice, I won't say the year that you graduated, but you and I were actually on the Pace Pleasantville campus for one semester, because I went there in the spring of 1980 something, and you graduated at the end of that year. So we were at the same place at the same time, many years ago.
Well, I hope I wasn't your RA. I know I wasn't, because I was in the all-girl dorm when there was just an all-girl dorm there. So nice to see you guys. Thanks, Bruce, for having me. Pace is, obviously near and dear to my heart. So I love participating in these things, especially to talk about entrepreneurship and really just to be part, like kind of encourage the students and tell them a little bit about my journey, and hopefully something resonates and you guys can take something home with you and, think about how that might affect you and your future, professional journey. For me, I was a nursing student. I grew up in a very middle-class background on Long Island. My father was a policeman and my mom was a homemaker. And basically, being a nurse just seemed like a very solid career, right, for a woman. I mean, I would even say, back in 1980, there were teachers and women became nurses and all this. So found, got my RN. I had a job, went to New York City, worked at New York Hospital, at Cornell Medical Center, great job, lots of fun things, living in Manhattan. Obviously, you guys probably know that firsthand. And about 3 years into my professional career as a nurse, I thought, this is okay, but I'll never be a doctor by being a good nurse. And if I go up the ranks of nurse, I'll probably just be, an administrator. And, that just doesn't seem that fun to me. So I just decided I'm going to throw, caution into the wind. And I decided I would leave nursing. And I went into, I had a friend that worked at an insurance brokerage company. And I went there and I taught them. So the insurance company needed to understand healthcare, which I knew, but I didn't understand insurance, but they taught me, and that was my second career. So what I say to my kids who are, your age, actually kids that I just had my daughter graduate from college, I tell them, don't worry about what you're studying right now. It is a springboard to your whole life. It's okay. You don't have to be boxed in like, oh, I'm only going to do this. You will gravitate naturally to things that you like. So get your degree. That's great. But don't feel like you're just married to that career forever. So fast forward, I get moved to California. I'm in this place called Silicon Valley. Don't really understand what that is. But I understand that there are all these Oracle is down the street and all these companies I didn't know. And my friend's husband, and this goes to my networking comment that I'll make later on, was starting this thing called Plug and Play Tech Center. He was an investor, and an angel investor. And if you know what angel investing is, it means that you have some capital to deploy, personal capital, where you would, make investments in startup companies. So my friend's journey, his name is Saeed Amidi. He is the owner of Plug and Play Tech Center. He opened it up in 2006. The reason he opened it up was because so if you're familiar with the Bay Area, we live really close to Stanford University. Stanford University is a hotbed for a lot of tech. Google started there, a very big, obviously, company. And my boss, Saeed, owns some real estate in Palo Alto. And he's of Iranian descent. And he was importing rugs from Iran. So who do you think were buying rugs? Very high net worth individuals were buying rugs. And guess who he was meeting? Entrepreneurs that had successful exits. So he would be selling rugs and he would think, how did this guy make all this money? And, so he meets the gentleman that started Android. So if you remember, and you guys probably don't, but there used to be a phone that flipped up like this with a keyboard, and it was called the Sidekick. It was revolutionary. It was pre-smartphone. He meets him, introduces him to a friend who works at Google. This guy then goes on to create Android for Google. So what I'm trying to say is, just by networking, and this is exactly what you guys are doing tonight, you will meet people if this is the journey that you want to go on. So I went and he hired me to work at Plug and Play. I did a couple of different things. I used to recruit technology. I used to help recruit for startup companies that were at Plug and Play. And it was like learning how to speak a different language because, Python and, Ruby on Rails, CSS, C++. I didn't understand all that stuff. So I had to go home and Google all this stuff. So never feel like, sometimes if you got to fake it a little bit till you make it. So you just go and you go home and Google's your best friend and you look things up and then you can speak intelligently about it. So anyway, went ahead and I started in 2008, and it typically Plug and Play was really just it was almost like the original WeWork. You would have people that would come, startups that would come in and they would just be working at Plug and Play. What we provided them was this network, and the network consisted of investors that were interested in startup companies, corporations that were looking outside their four walls for innovation. So think about this. You have, Airbnb. They literally disrupted the hotel industry. Nobody saw that coming, right? Like the hotel industry is like, we're making incremental changes like digital keys and you can check in with your smartphone. Meanwhile, there's like something brewing that really just revolutionized how we look at where you stay. Think about Uber, right? Uber revolutionized transportation. So my boss, Saeed, he had a family fund. He makes some investments. some of those investments we talked about, PayPal was one of them. He has a funny story. He says Max Levchin and Peter Thiel, who were the founders of PayPal, they came into his office. The two guys that look like they can't even pay for lunch, never mind pay for space that they were going to rent from him. So he said, you know what? Here's the deal. I will take a year up front in rent, and I want to become an investor, and I'll take a year in equity. And that's how he got his first investment into PayPal. So now remember, PayPal, again, you have to say, I know you guys are from a different generation, but Bruce and I can relate that there was no thing like mobile, like, transfer of funds. So this was revolutionary. So again, it was a disruption. So Peter Thiel, as you know, has gone on to do many. Palantir is one of his biggest companies now. And typically, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. So, we had a lot of exposure to things like that. I'll tell you that Saeed makes a lot of investments. He did miss a couple along the way. So, as investors, you got to say, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but Airbnb, he had a very early opportunity to invest in Airbnb, and he didn't. He didn't like the fact that there was liability, that he didn't know how that was going to pan out. And if you read the book about the co-founders of Airbnb, that was a very big problem for them initially. They did have some, people were renting these places and having these major parties and blah, blah, blah. And but they wound up figuring that out. But anyway, so I just want to say, it always sounds glorious, when you hear oh, PayPal and Dropbox, but you know what, there are some that you miss along the way, and some that you don't make any money on. So, anyway, so my journey went from nursing to insurance to technology. And, my point being there is, don't be afraid of, say if you're studying business is business, regardless of what industry you're in. Take what you know, and you can always transfer it into a different piece of that actual business, or to do something else. Like my healthcare background always came in handy.
No, thank you. And, I think that, openness, changing careers, it's something I did quite a lot, as I briefly said in my intro. And if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, where can I add value? How can I solve problems? How can I create benefits? So, my career was like a ping pong. I like Steve Jobs said, you could only connect the dots looking backwards, not looking forwards. So, yeah, it was an eclectic career at best. If you, there was a Forbes article, they named me, if you Google Forbes Man of Mystery, you might find me. So let me ask you a little bit more about PayPal. And I love how the story of it starting with, Ruggs, can you tell me tell us, I'm personally interested, so I'm pretending you're just talking to me, but some of not only the milestones along the way as they develop, but how they changed their business model. Because it sounds like, as you said, it was WeWork and maybe a bit of an accelerator, a bit of an angel investor. And now there's this whole other part about connecting these Fortune 500 companies with startups. So can you tell us about some of the evolution, the business model? Because it sounds like they're doing something very unique.
Yes. So, like I said, Plug and Play started, and we were really a home for startup companies. So they didn't have to work in their garage. They could come. They had a reception area. They had a cafeteria. They had meeting rooms, etc. So this way, if they were meeting with a potential recruit, somebody that they wanted to get on their team, or they were meeting with investors, they didn't have to go to a Starbucks. So we created that environment. What happened was, in 2008, we had, obviously there was a little bit of a crash in terms of, capital. So at the same time, we noticed venture capital was drying up. But what was interesting was that corporations, these Fortune 500 corporations, the banks, the insurance companies, the manufacturers, they were all looking for innovation. They were afraid they were going to get disrupted. They saw how quickly things could change. So they started coming. So how do you source innovation, right? So they, you come to Silicon Valley. So we were that point of contact where they could send out their innovation scouts, and they could see startup companies based on, a business challenge that they might have. Or they might just say, in innovation, we talk about Horizon 1, 2, and 3, right? So Horizon 1 is like something that can immediately change your business, right? Like it can make things go better, more efficiently and more cheaply, or more inexpensively. So that's Horizon 1. But a lot of these companies were like, I don't want to see the trend for today, but I want to see what's coming down the pike in 5 years, because that's just equally as important, right? Because again, we don't want to be caught off guard. We don't want to be the taxi industry in New York when Uber takes over. Like think of autonomous vehicles now. That is the future. I mean, like, let's get real. Like that's happening. And then you think to yourself, okay, if you have autonomous vehicles, if everybody's in their car now, what's the media going to be in the car? Because now you can watch a movie in a car. You can listen to music in a car. What's the experience? You can game in a car. So now you have like Sony thinking, oh, we're going to have all these autonomous vehicles in XYZ time. We got to start creating content for that experience in the car. So that's why we now connect corporates to startup companies, because the corporates are like, show me something that I can use now and show me something I can use in 5 years based on what's happening and the digital innovation. So that's what we do. So our corporates pay us a fee, like a subscription fee, and we show them startup companies based on their interest and needs. So, and we're global. So, a corporation, they can get a lot of one-off phone calls. Like if you're a startup, you'll try to reach out to these companies, but sort of that one-stop shopping is really important. Like we can boil the ocean down for them a little bit and show them what's just relevant. So that's why we have that engagement. The startups love to work with us because they get these high-level introductions without having to give up any equity. So remember, a lot of these accelerators, they will take equity from you in order to mentor you and give you those, to advise you, mentor you, and give you those introductions. We don't take equity only if, we make investments apart from our corporate innovation platform.
Okay. And Connie, is there's Horizon 1 is kind of the immediate changes. Horizon 2, like 3 to 5 years, and Horizon 3 is way in the future.
Right. That's kind of like, I see stuff that, like you're going, oh my God, I hope I'm not, that sounds really weird. That you can read
Right.
facial expressions and, all sorts of stuff that is a little bit more artificial intelligence, and how that's going to affect natural language processing, things like that. They're a little bit out there right now, but nonetheless in Horizon 3.
No, I think it's always important to think that way. And there was a book decades ago by some McKinsey partners called The Alchemy of Growth, and looking at those 3 horizons. Before I get into, and then we'll open up to everyone, some specific questions about entrepreneurship on innovation at companies. I just wanted to ask a little about the culture between the Northeast, or specifically here in New York, which was for a long time very traditional big business. We have transition, I think large part thanks to Mayor Bloomberg and the financial crisis, to more of an entrepreneurial mindset, and now number 2 in investment after Silicon Valley. But can you talk about the culture out in Silicon Valley versus New York, both on like for business networking and conducting business, but also like just on a social level?
Yeah. So I was just listening to a Bloomberg report, and Steve Case from AOL was talking about that 75% of all venture capital is deployed in Silicon Valley, New York, and Massachusetts. So Massachusetts tends to be more biotech, more health tech. Obviously, New York is probably more fintech, insurtech. And then California is probably, we're doing lots of different things here. So, there is a cultural difference. I notice a cultural difference a lot. Not so much in New York, because you guys are, you got that beat and that rhythm going. California, it's like you have to, it's like move fast and break things. Like, just don't be afraid to fail. And that is so counterintuitive to how we grew up, right? Like, oh, let's take the safe thing. Don't fail, don't fail. Entrepreneurs, you can't be afraid to fail, because chances are you're going to fail, because not everyone is that, is going to be the winner. So I think it's about how fast we move. It's about not being afraid to fail. It's about being able to pivot. Sometimes you go down this road and all of a sudden you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. There's regulation that maybe will impede my ability to really carry on with this idea. So then what you do, you have to do a pivot, and you have to react quickly. The other thing is, I would say that there's a ton of networking opportunities in Silicon Valley. There's tons of meetups. I mean, again, COVID did put a damper on everything. So I think a lot is virtual right now. But if there are entrepreneurs out there in the audience, I encourage you, go to those meetups, go to those networking events where you are meeting like-minded people, because you think the same. Entrepreneurs, I always say it's a different breed of person. These are the dreamers. These are the risk takers. Entrepreneurs are the visionaries. Sometimes the founders, they're great. Sometimes when you get to the point where you want to run the company, they may not be the same person. They have different skill sets. You might want to bring in a business person at that point. But I'm just saying, very early when you're building, go to network. LinkedIn is your best friend. If you need to reach out to somebody, reach out to them, send them a note. I'm always like really sensitive to people's time. So I might be like, hey, I saw that you are the, CIO of this company. And if you have an idea and you need some help, you need an advisor, you'll meet them at these types of events. Or you might just reach out to people on LinkedIn. So I'm a big advocate of talking about your what you're doing. People sometimes think, oh, I can't share that because, I'm going to let them know what I'm doing. I'm like, believe me, there is no new idea out there. That idea has happened. Let me tell you, Google was not the first search engine. It was the 16th search engine. The difference between Google and Bing and Netscape, which Bruce and I will remember, they didn't make it because it's a lot of it is execution. A lot of it is pivoting. A lot of it is the growth mindset. So remember those, so I sometimes people are like, oh, if I tell them my idea, they're not, they might take it. I'm like, you're kidding, right? Like, unless you're sharing your intellectual property with them, they're not taking it. Because, you can tell them your idea, but they have to create it still. So I'm just saying, be open, network. I think get used to moving quickly and don't be afraid. I know New York, I think you guys are there almost, maybe not as fast as California in this sense, but like in Europe, I could see in Europe, it's definitely slower. Like they are much more cautious. So we have to work with them a little bit, handhold a little bit more. So that's a big difference.
No, thanks. And with, a couple of quick stories with, one of the reasons I showed you, or not you, Connie, but the students that are on, that wall of thanks is that if you do want to connect with people like through LinkedIn, a great thing to do is you could also search for a PACE alum and, say I'm at PACE, but also if you look at all those people and say, oh, at the eLab, I saw you spoke on whatever topic, it's so much better than just, a cold disconnect. But to tell you about networking at the pitch contest, a few years ago, I was approached by someone who wanted to use Presdo Match as a way to facilitate meetings, at these events. And he gave me this rundown, this guy, Eric Lee, and he showed me everything. I said, but everything you do depends on LinkedIn. What happens if LinkedIn stops partnering with you? And he just says casually, well, I'm the co-founder of LinkedIn. I'm LinkedIn user number 2. They won't. But with Google being the 16th search engine, the guy who invented the very first search engine, Yaron Galai, an Israeli entrepreneur, did it when he noticed Amazon every web page used to have like 4 pages, every company, like About Us, a homepage. And when Amazon said they're going to have 1 million titles, he said, well, people are going to need a way to search through that website. So they created a website search tool that I didn't know this until much later, his partner was Quigo was a PACE dropout, not a PACE alum. And he went on and created all these other companies, now has a multi-billion-dollar company called Outbrain that just went public a few weeks ago. So, networking, all that. And let me ask you with networking, one quick question, because in some ways I see like people, at Google, they don't even care about a college degree, just give you a test, see how you could do. On the other hand, I look at so many of these Silicon Valley startups like PayPal, and it seems like everybody met at Stanford. And, there's this very close, like the old Harvard, old boys network, in traditional Northeast, big companies. It seems like so many of these people met at Stanford, and Stanford is just this calling card to open doors to Sand Hill Road, to all the VCs and everything else. Can you tell us a little bit about, the raw talent versus the Stanford connection versus what else people look for in networking?
Listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like Stanford is a calling card, right? Like, you go to, a lot of people go to Stanford just to, to get their master's so they can be connected to that. But I wouldn't, I've met entrepreneurs from all over the world. I think if you're passionate, if you really have a good idea, and I'm going to say, to me, a good idea, is something, maybe you're changing something that maybe you've experienced has not worked. Like you're in the industry and you're like, why are we looking through all these papers when we could, do robotic process automation? And that person like came up with the algorithm to search documents so we could, not go through reams of information. Like, think about cloud and cloud infrastructure. So I do think that Stanford has a calling card. I think if you're an entrepreneur, you can try to get into different accelerator programs, like Y Combinator is a good accelerator program. That's, if it's in healthcare, there might be like Startup X, which is, I think, in Boston. So, there are different programs that you can get into. So I think there's opportunity. I wouldn't say, just because you didn't go to Stanford, you're kind of, messed up. I think if you have a good idea, you guys are in the finance capital of the world, and, think about any kind of fintech banking. And I think you probably have a lot of resources right there that you can use. And when I say, if you have an idea and it's in that industry, reach out, get advisors that are in that industry to help you. So you may have a great idea, but you might not, but you don't know the inside of the industry. Get that industry perspective. Get somebody to help you there. So, and I think, Sand Hill Road, that's real venture capital, but, you could start out with bootstrapping your company. You could start out with angel investing, and maybe you are generating revenue, and then you can go on to venture.
Okay, great. No, thanks. And I dipped my toe in angel investing because in searching for people like you to speak at these events, to be guest speakers in class, to be judges, etc. I went to an angel group hoping to meet entrepreneurs and investors who would talk. And the pitch was so convincing. It was just in the field you spoke about. Very boring concept, but great business model. And I wrote a check, joined the Westchester Angels, invested in the company, and a VC just came in last month and offered us 18 times what we put in. So so it's fun and rewarding.
Yeah. And like a lot of times, like business ideas aren't always the most sexy ideas, like you're not like, oh, that sounds really fun. It's probably some kind of way to speed up, make an organization more efficient. It could be HR technology. A lot of it, like think about Talkspace, or telehealth. Right. Telehealth became so popular during the pandemic. Right. So sometimes there's a situation that makes things ramp up a little bit quicker too.
And that's exactly what it was. It was what I thought the most boring thing, OCR, optical character recognition. But for healthcare, you could scan all the records and sort them, exactly what you were talking about. And for anyone interested, the founder of that company, Acrolis, which is now worth hundreds of millions of dollars, came in and spoke at one of these panels not long ago. So again, with the past events, you find that. And if you're interested in that area, a quick LinkedIn note saying, this guy, Sam, saying, I saw your talk at PACE, and that'll get much more attention. So I have two more questions before we open it to everyone. And one is about your role connecting startups and big companies. Because I think while some people are interested in the startup world, others are interested in, a more traditional, larger company, but want to be doing something cool and innovative. So can you talk about, how you put them together and, kind of what is the, the benefits and concerns for each party, and how does that get structured, and kind of what does that look like?
Yeah, no, great question. And so remember I talked about the entrepreneurs, the dreamers, the risk takers, so if you're not that, you don't, because you have to have like the stomach for that a little bit, but if, or the passion, if you like innovation and you still want to change and the world in maybe your industry, you can be on the corporate side of innovation. So every corporation now pretty much has an innovation arm where they are looking at digital transformation of, for instance, like in insurance, like how do you write a policy? How do you send the auto policies out? How do we, think about how do we underwrite policies? Maybe you have telemetrics in your car, right? Because it's measuring every time you step on the brake and it's telling them you're stepping on the brake too much, and that becomes information that they'll underwrite on. What I'm trying to say is corporations are looking for ways to innovate too. So you can have a job inside a corporate industry, go into the innovation arm, and there's a couple of different ways they do it. One is there's corporate investing. So you have a corporate VC, so they're called CVCs. So there's venture capital, but then in corporate venture capital, they're looking for solutions very, very strategically aligned to, their mission. So, for Sherwin-Williams paints, they're always looking for, paints that, are going to be revolutionary, maybe more durable, maybe more sustainable, etc. So they're not going to invest in, like a hotel. They're going to invest in their core business. So think about CVC. You can get into that piece of the business, or we work with a lot of companies where the innovation arm is like this business unit where they go to the other business units and they say, tell me what your problems are. How can we work more efficiently? How can we do this, less expensively? How do we delight our customer more? How do we engage our customer more? How do we monetize this? So you business units are innovation scouts at these corporations, go to individual business units and come up with a challenge that they have, and then we help source technologies for them. And then we bring in, along with our internal innovation scouts, those solutions, and we introduce them to the business unit at the corporation. And hopefully they can do what usually the next step is, like a pilot. They'll run like a pilot program with them to see if is there something here. And then if the pilot is successful, they'll integrate it into part of their actual business systems. So what I'm trying to say is, if you like innovation, you can get on the corporate side of innovation, where you're looking at those solutions in the different industry area that you are in. And then you can help source startup companies to bring into your organization. And you could do that, bring in the startup company. Sometimes we call it co-creation, where you might have the internal teams already done some research and development. They have almost the whole thing figured out, but they need one piece of it. Maybe the AI piece of it is missing or is not robust enough. So then they'll take our startup and they'll co-create a solution together. So I'm just saying, it's a great way to be involved in innovation. I think you could, and if you are working in corporate America and you see something that you feel you could do better, go explore it. Bring it to your manager. Be the hero. Be like the person that's like, you know what? Why have we been doing it the same way all the time? Let's try to find a solution. And you can go out there and maybe if this is your passion, go do the research and find out what's available out there, and maybe bring that in. And believe me, you'll stand head over shoulders above your colleagues if you have that kind of passion and insight and forward thinking.
Yeah, and that gets to again what I call the entrepreneurial thinking. Always look for ways to solve problems and provide benefits in a company or otherwise. And you mentioned Sherwin-Williams and like Horizon 3, and it's hard to think, what would they do? When I was on the global board of the MIT Enterprise Forum up in Cambridge, I remember going to the MIT Media Lab, and they were painting this room with this paint. And the idea was, instead of a light switch, you just touch your hand where the light switch would be and it go on, or draw a circle and a clock would appear. And they thought it was helpful for people that were, elderly, disabled, blind, whatever. So maybe that's a Horizon 3 thing for sure.
Exactly. The stuff where they're thinking about, you really got to open up your mind.
Yeah. Well, let me get to the last question, then open it up to the students. Is like, how might a recent PACE grad, or even a current PACE student who's looking for an internship, who's interested in, getting into a startup, getting into a company with a lot of innovation, or getting into a firm like a plug and play, or an accelerator, et cetera, like you mentioned, Y Combinator, how might they position themselves in? Because I'm sure those exciting jobs are hard to get, but what advice, last question, would you give to a PACE student or recent grad to get into one of these exciting fields we've been talking about?
Yeah, again, follow your passion. So, I would do the networking that needs to be done. I do the reaching out. Please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn, or I'll give you my email. Like I said, I have a soft spot in my heart for PACE University graduates, so I'd love to help. If you are interested in, I know we are hiring. I didn't think this was going to turn into this kind of a thing, but we are hiring. So typically, if that's something that you're interested in, we just opened up an office in Chicago. We're global. Honestly, we have offices in Milan, in Singapore, in Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. Munich, blah, 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 blah. And in New York, and in the States, it's Fargo, North Dakota, which you might think, why Fargo? But, you know, animal health, think about that. Think about Monsanto, think about, you know, actually Hills, like all the pet food. They are always, you know, there are supply chain things. We're in Savannah, Georgia. We're opening up there because it's a big port. So if you are interested actually in innovation, feel free to reach out to me. I'll even put my email in the chat, or reach out I'm on LinkedIn. But if you want to stay in New York, believe it or not, we don't have a New York office.
Yeah, we'll have to start one.
But you know, you never know, things change. But you know, we're always looking for venture associates. That's where those are the people that look at startup companies. They're constantly sourcing startups. And then we have the corporate facing side, which is like once our corporates come to our platform, and you know, we try to figure out what they need, and then we service them there. So you know, let me know. That's one thing. And really, again, reach out. Do not be afraid to network. That's how you meet people. You're always, you know, you're your own best advocate. So and you know, a friend of a friend, you know, can help. And of course, you know, just look up innovation on Google and start, you know, Indeed, all those, look at all those innovation jobs.
Okay, thank you, Connie.